All right, let's talk about fiscal policy. It's basically the government's economic toolkit, the most powerful and, yeah, often the most controversial set of tools it has for trying to steer the entire country's economy. So, how does it actually work? Let's get into it.
So picture this. The economy is in trouble. You've seen the headlines, right? A recession might be coming, unemployment is ticking up. When things hit a rough patch like this, you have to wonder, what can a government actually do? Well, the answer really boils down to two fundamental things: how it spends money and how it collects money.
And that's the core of what we mean by fiscal policy. It's the strategic use of government spending and taxes to influence the economy. And look, this isn't just about balancing a budget. It's about actively trying to create stable, sustainable growth for everyone.
To really get how these tools work, we first need to pop the hood and look at the engine they're designed to tune: the economy itself.
It all kind of starts with this equation for gross domestic product, or GDP. You can think of the whole economy as being made up of consumer spending, C, business investment, I, government spending, G, and net exports. Now, the government has a really direct lever here with G. It can just decide to spend more money. Simple. But it also has an indirect influence. Think about it. By cutting taxes, it leaves more money in your pocket, which can boost C, and more money for companies, which can encourage I.
Okay, so let's zoom in on those two main levers: how the government gets its money, its revenue, and how it spends it, its expenditure. On the revenue side, it's pretty much all about taxes. You've got direct taxes, like your income tax, which comes straight out of your paycheck. You definitely feel that burden directly. Then there are indirect taxes, like a sales tax, which are built into the prices of stuff you buy. The business technically pays the government, but you know they're just passing that cost right along to you.
Now for the spending side. And this is important. Not all spending is created equal. You've got current expenditure, which covers the day-to-day running costs, paying public sector salaries for teachers and police officers. But capital expenditure, that's totally different. This is the long-term investment stuff. Building new roads, bridges, high-speed internet. These are the assets that can fundamentally boost the economy's potential for years and years to come.
So we have the tools. How does a government actually use them to hit the gas or pump the brakes on the economy? Well, that is the whole game of demand management.
When the economy is sluggish, the government can hit the accelerator. That's called expansionary policy. It can either increase its own spending on projects or cut taxes, or both. Either way, it's injecting money into the economy. That means we have more disposable income to spend, which boosts overall demand, and that pushes businesses to produce more and hire more people.
But what about the opposite problem? What if the economy is overheating and prices, inflation, are getting out of control? That's when the government hits the brakes. This is called contractionary policy. It cuts spending or raises taxes. This pulls money out of the economy, which means we have less to spend, cooling down demand and helping to get those rising prices back under control.
Okay, so the theory sounds straightforward enough, but how does this actually play out in the messy, real world? Well, the 2008 Great Recession was probably one of the biggest tests for expansionary fiscal policy we've seen in modern history. In response to that massive crisis, the U.S. government unleashed an absolutely enormous stimulus package. The main one, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, was a staggering $787 billion. Just a huge injection of tax cuts, aid, and direct government spending.
But here's the multi-billion-dollar question. Did it work? To this day, that's still hotly debated. Critics called it a leaky bucket, arguing that instead of spending the extra money, people just used it to pay down their debts. And here's the thing. The government's own projections said unemployment would stay below 8% with the plan. Instead, it shot up to 10%. It's a pretty stark reminder that economic models, well, they don't always get it right.
So why would a government spend so much money on something so uncertain? The thinking behind it relies on this incredibly powerful idea that $1 of government spending can actually become much, much more. It's a concept called the Keynesian multiplier. The basic idea is that money the government spends doesn't just stop. It becomes income for a construction worker, who then spends it at a local restaurant, whose owner then uses it to pay their suppliers. You see, it creates this massive ripple effect through the whole economy.
But that ripple doesn't go on forever. Every time that new dollar of income gets passed on, some of it leaks out of the domestic economy. Some of it gets saved, some is paid back in taxes, and some gets spent on goods from other countries, imports. Only the part that actually gets spent again here at home keeps that ripple going.
So, this is the really crucial part.
The bigger that spent slice is, what economists call the marginal propensity to consume, the bigger the ripple effect and the more powerful the stimulus. If people tend to spend, say, 90 cents of every new dollar they get, that stimulus is going to be way more effective than if they only spend 50 cents.
So, fiscal policy seems incredibly powerful, right? Almost like a magic wand for the economy. But, and this is a big but, it is not a silver bullet. It comes with some very real, very significant limitations.
Honestly, one of the biggest problems is just time. It moves so slowly. First, there's a lag in even recognizing that a recession has officially started. Then you have the political process, the debates, the arguments, actually passing a law, and finally there's the time it takes to actually spend the money on big projects. By the time the stimulus really hits the ground, the economy might be in a completely different place. Then you get into this really fascinating debate over something called crowding out. The idea is that in normal times, if the government borrows a ton of money to spend, it can drive up interest rates. That makes it more expensive for private companies to borrow and invest. So, in effect, government spending crowds out private spending. But, and this is key, in a really deep recession, the opposite might happen. Government spending can be the spark that encourages private companies to start investing again, crowding in more spending and amplifying the whole effect. It really depends on the situation.
And on top of all that, you have to factor in two other massive constraints. First, politics. Let's be real. Policies are often designed to be popular and win votes, not necessarily to be the most economically effective. And second, public debt. If a country already has a lot of debt, it has less room, less fiscal space, to borrow more money to fight the next crisis.
Which really brings us to the core dilemma of all of this. Fiscal policy is an incredibly powerful tool, no doubt, but it's also imprecise, it's slow, and it comes with very real risks and side effects. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, for policymakers and for all of us really. Given all the risks, when is the cost of the government stepping in greater than the cost of doing nothing at all?